one of the most important headquarters of the Russian army was blown up. The Kremlin called for an emergency meeting after this operation, and Putin's resignation was demanded at the meeting. Major problems began to manifest themselves in many points of the Russian bureaucracy. Putin officially fled the Kremlin. The reaction of a soldier during the visit to the military headquarters created great tension. The army no longer wants Putin. The military headquarters where Putin was visiting was detected by Ukrainian forces, and a major operation was organized in the area. The situation resulted in significant financial losses for Russia. Anti-Putin and anti-war protests in Moscow have escalated to the point where the Russian people have started collecting signatures among themselves. Russian bureaucrats took action when Russia's economic woes, caused by recent failures, became too great. Putin's thoughtless decisions, without considering the consequences, have angered every segment of the Russian population, which is starting to cause trouble for Putin. In a secret meeting attended by most of the bureaucrats in the Kremlin, they argued that Putin should resign immediately. After this move by the deputies, who believe that Putin's KGB-style methods are no longer effective in the modern world, riots started among various strates of the Russian population. One important headline is that Russian commanders, who had previously attempted a coup in the Russian army, decided to make peace with Ukraine after many failed operations that demonstrated Russia's considerably weakened military power to the whole world. Russian generals have become unable to hide their discomfort. However, it is believed that the situation is not limited to the generals, but almost the entire Russian army shares the same sentiment. Putin is thought to have learned about the resignation demand through the KGB's deep intelligence service, especially since the army is also aware of the risk of a coup against Putin from within. Realizing that this would pose a significant problem, Putin left the Kremlin promptly, using the pretext of inspecting the headquarters. Putin made a stop for inspection at a Russian headquarters in the Luhansk region, where all the events that took place unfolded. Several events deeply affected Putin. The soldiers did not react to Putin's arrival at the headquarters. They did not respect or care about him. Immediately after that, a Russian soldier serving in the army lashed out, shocking everyone in the region. "You are sending us against the Ukrainian army with outdated weapons. Don't our lives have any value?" Putin's bodyguards swiftly attacked the soldier. Another group of bodyguards immediately surrounded Putin, taking a stand against the soldiers to prevent a potential threat. As tensions escalated, everyone witnessed how Putin could make a harsh move. Following the events, the Russian soldier who shouted at Putin was captured and taken to prison under the headquarters for punishment. Not expecting this reaction, Putin decided to have dinner with the soldiers to alleviate the tension in the headquarters. However, the reaction Putin received from the army soldiers shattered all his expectations. Putin had a table prepared for dinner in the soldiers' mess hall, and he stood up to address the soldiers, proclaiming that the Russian army would emerge victorious in the ongoing war. However, he received no reaction from any soldier. Putin sat down and called his advisor to taste the food. When Putin's advisor took a spoonful of the food and dropped it to the ground, Putin's bodyguards sprang into action. They surrounded Putin and escorted him out of the dining hall. Putin ordered his bodyguards to imprison the commander in charge of the headquarters to face a military trial. This commander is expected to receive significant penalties due to the events that followed. Israel and Britain, which have provided extensive support to the Ukrainian army, shared valuable intelligence, stating that Putin had left the Kremlin and was in a military headquarters in Luhansk. Upon receiving this intelligence, the Ukrainian army swiftly prepared and took action, not knowing when Putin would leave. Every second was crucial for the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian army first deployed Bayraktars to identify the routes. Sonar scans revealed no obstacles hindering Ukraine's progress. The Ukrainian special forces immediately surrounded the designated military headquarters upon receiving this news. Ukrainian infantry units placed remote-controlled forts in the area to surprise the Russians and disrupt their positions. During this operation, one of the remote-controlled C4 explosives detonated, catching the Russian army off guard. The Ukrainian army dealt a significant blow to the retreating Russian troops through grenade throwing. As they pressed on with their offensive, they realized that the Russian army was not responding at all. While the headquarters continued to be bombed, it became evident that the headquarters was completely sealed off. At this point, a heroic Ukrainian army came up with a clever idea and activated the jammers. Shortly after, they launched missiles from HIMARS to create a large breach in the North Gate. The relentless missile strikes completely destroyed the Russian military headquarters, resulting in the loss of many Russian soldiers' lives in the south corridors. The Ukrainian army then moved in to neutralize any remaining threats inside the headquarters. They systematically searched each floor and discovered the lifeless body of Putin's advisor in the dining hall. The messages found on the phone taken from Putin's advisor shocked the entire Ukrainian army. It was revealed that Putin had left the region approximately 1 hour before the headquarters was destroyed. The strategic use of jammers effectively prevented any news from reaching the Kremlin, causing many soldiers to lose their lives without Putin's knowledge. The Ukrainian army swiftly captured the commander of the headquarters after the operation and the ensuing events. Thanks to this unjustly imprisoned commander, the whole world became aware of the plot to assassinate Putin. The general's confession videos were transmitted to Putin in an unexpected manner. Ukrainian soldiers, who obtained the advisor's cell phone and disabled the jammers, delivered the video to Putin's chief bodyguard. Faced with this situation, Putin officially went into a frenzy. He immediately called for an extraordinary meeting that lasted about 9 hours. The meeting, attended by many high-level bureaucrats, attracted attention due to the absence of any opposition figures. At the end of the meeting, Putin made several decisions that would make Russia completely anti-democratic. One of the most significant decisions was to place complete authority in the hands of the army to maintain order and eliminate the possibility of a coup. Putin's new anti-democratic form of government, which lacks any limits on his actions, allows him to act without concern for public opinion. However, the year 2000 is not an era where dictators can thrive, given the circumstances. No matter how harsh Putin's decisions may be, the outcome is quite clear. As history has shown, every authoritarian leader faces an insurmountable challenge: the will of the people. The Russian people's anger towards Putin further illustrates the situation. 20,000 personnel of the Russian army retreated to Belgorod. Putin, who was furious after this operation, signed a critical decision. And while he wanted to hurt Ukraine, he faced huge problems in foreign policy. In the last days of the Russian-Ukrainian war, the Ukrainian army started to take very different steps. Ukrainian soldiers started to take the lead in every field and started to make effective use of all the support they received. With this attitude, it became clear that the Ukrainian army was preparing to end the war in many areas. This operation, which ended the Russian army's presence in Luhansk, was seen all over the world as a trailer for the summer operation. From the beginning of the Russian-Ukrainian war, the support given to the Ukrainian army was always of a nature that would enable it to actively advance in different areas. At the beginning, a lot of support was given to the Ukrainian army to protect itself, and a possible World War III was prevented. After these recent statements, when the Ukrainian army started to design many operations to end the war against the Russians, the Western countries started to provide great support. And many countries which have completely changed their line are now mobilizing for Ukraine not to defend itself, but to launch the offensive to end the war. At this point, tanks played a very important role. And thanks to these tanks, the Ukrainian army dealt such a blow to the Russians that everything turned in favor of Ukraine. First of all, the Ukrainian army decided to evaluate the ammunition and vehicles to be used for the summer operation in a very critical way. Thanks to this decision, Ukrainian soldiers who will be actively involved in many areas have now decided to test their strength in response to the Russian army's moves in Luhansk. Ahead of the upcoming summer operation, the Russian army tried an unthinkable tactic in this region and gave the Russian soldiers hell, and the Ukrainian army showed how much stronger it has become recently. The Ukrainian army started to prepare the tank support it received from Western countries for this operation. A very different idea was presented in this operation, which will be entered directly against the Russian army. Realizing that the soldiers on the front line of Luhansk facing Ukraine were very reluctant, Ukrainian soldiers decided to attack directly from this region. The Ukrainian army, which was not yet aware that it would achieve a critical victory against the Russians in this region, took immediate action after completing its preparations. The Ukrainian army brought out a large number of armored vehicles and tanks, and it activated the jammers it had provided to Ukrainian agents on the Luhansk front. These jammers would not be able to show the Russian soldiers behind the front line how big an army was moving this way. The Ukrainian army started the operation with deciding of its tanks on the first front. Although the Russian soldiers had gained considerable resistance in this area, they had no chance against Ukraine. When the Ukrainian army came against the Russian soldiers were surprised by the counterattack. Ukraine's thanks for nothing like Putin's propaganda. They had the power to break the Russian army's positions. The Russian army also had tanks in this area, but it was not in a position to confront Ukraine because Ukraine, thanks to its tanks, had the capacity to pierce the armor of everything in this region. The Russian army, unable to stand against this power, had to retreat after a while. But the Ukrainian army had already determined the steps it would take in this region, and it went on the offensive. The Russians, who wanted to inform the previous front, were in for a big surprise as the Ukrainian army continued to advance in this area. A group of Russians fleeing to the other front told them that Ukraine was coming very strong and crushing everything in its path. The Russian soldiers didn't believe this, believing that they could stop the Ukrainian army. But when they saw the Ukrainian army coming, a large part of them started to retreat. Part of the front retreated towards Belgorod. The other group wanted to establish a resistance, but they could not hold on to this front, and they had to retreat, too. When the Ukrainian army retook this area, they returned with great joy. Then Putin learned about this latest development. He went crazy with anger, and he made the critical decision. The Russian army thought it was close to victory over Ukraine, but recent developments have made it clear that this approach is not clear-cut enough. If things continue as they are, the Ukrainian army is expected to win one of its biggest victories against the Russians in a very short time. Putin, on the other hand, has started to make very harsh moves with the irritation of retreating even from the territories he occupied. If these moves continue, it is one of the most striking points that the Russians will not be able to take even the slightest step against Ukraine in a short time. It is possible to say that Putin, who had to withdraw from these regions, may even resign in a short time because Putin is making moves thinking that he will be permanent in each of the regions he occupies. It is known that every withdrawal of Putin, who builds headquarters in these regions and transfers his tanks and weapons to this region, reflects a very large bill to Russia. Knowing that these invoices pave the way for further operations in Ukraine, it is not entirely clear what Putin will do, realizing that Russia's bankruptcy is imminent. If it continues in this way, he finds the remedy in making threats to many countries. Among these countries is even the UK, which is known to be of critical importance in many areas. Although the Kremlin officials immediately denied it when it was revealed that Russia had threatened Boris Johnson's statements, things continue to get complicated in this region as well. Knowing that it does not stand a chance against Ukraine, it is not entirely clear what kind of policy the Russian army will pursue. But the comments made by war analysts on this issue will stand the whole world, according to war analysts. The Ukrainian army is expected to take bigger steps against the Russians in a short time. Among these steps, there are also those that will make the Russian army evolve towards versus. Much of this is based on the fact that the Ukrainian army has now established a sustained superiority over the Russians. If this continued, Ukraine would no longer need to think about other phases of the war. Missiles launched by Russia were shot down and destroyed by the Ukrainian Air Force. Also, despite all the missiles being shot down, Russia insisted that all targets are identified in the overnight missile barrage had been hit by its military. The Defense Ministry in Moscow stated that the long-range precision-hit missiles targeted storage facilities, housing, ammunition, weapons and military equipment supplied by Western countries. Russia's defense ministry said in a statement that all the targets set were hit. It remains unclear which Western weapon Ukraine uses to defend against Kinzler and other hypersonic missiles. However, the Ukrainian army emphasizes that 6 Russian hypersonic Kinzler missiles were shot down by the Patriot system, and 12 other hypersonic missiles were shot down by the Ukrainian air defense. This is a big shame for the Russian army. On the other hand, Russia's hypersonic missiles have been proving recently that they are not unstoppable. The Ukrainians recently did what the Kremlin administration said was impossible, and shot down an advanced Russian Kinzler missile. Russia's hypersonic weapon was targeting the Patriot missile system that shot it down. Russian forces targeted a Patriot system using the weapon's radar signature to detect incoming attacks. Operating the system, the Ukrainian crew fired several missiles, attacking the hypersonic from different angles, and destroyed it. A state-of-the-art hypersonic missile is successfully destroyed by a third-generation air defense system over 20 years old. General Petrita, a spokesman for the Pentagon, confirmed that a Patriot shot down a Russian hypersonic plane. Ryder did not elaborate further and noted that it's unclear whether the missile system was supplied by the United States, Germany, or the Netherlands. The Patriot system counterattack marks the second known successful use of the advanced air defense system, just weeks after its arrival in Ukraine. Ukraine has received at least 2 Patriot systems, one from the US and the other from Germany, to improve its air defense, which previously could not intercept more modern Russian missiles, such as the Konsul. Ukrainian Air Force spokesman Yuri Ihnat described the delivery of the systems as a turning point. So what are the features of the 47-meter-squared Kinzhal hypersonic missile? The Kinzhal missile, whose name means dagger, can carry conventional or nuclear warheads up to a distance of 2,000 kilometers. The Kinzhal is an advanced system adapted for launching at speed and altitude from the MiG-31, a high-speed Russian fighter jet. Russia first used this weapon in the war in Ukraine last year. Russia has admitted to firing these hypersonic missiles on only a few times. Russian President Vladimir Putin has often touted Kinzhal as proof that Russian equipment capable of defeating NATO is beating the world. Vladimir Putin noted that the missile flying at a hypersonic speed 10 times faster than the speed of sound is also capable of maneuvering at all stages of the flight trajectory, which allows it to overcome all possible problems, judging by the statements of the Russian leader. The power of his hypersonic missiles sounds incredibly magnificent. However, the downing of one of Russia's Kinzhal missiles in Ukraine raises questions about these boastful claims. In another development, Ukraine is counting on Western support to defend against Russian aggression. The Ukrainian army is preparing for a large-scale counterattack. Kiev had been stating for months that the attack would take place in May or June. However, in the last few days, Zelensky stated that the Ukrainian army will delay the large-scale offensive operation because it still has insufficient numbers of important Western weapon systems in its forces. Almost 15 months have passed since the war in Ukraine began. The United States and NATO continue to support Kiev's freedom struggle. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has just finished a European tour that has garnered substantial military aid. The Ukrainian leader visited Italy, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, the 4 major European countries that support Ukraine's defense. The United Kingdom has announced a package of air defense missiles and long-range attack unmanned aerial systems to Ukraine. Air defense munitions are designed to deal with Russian cruise missile and suicide drone volley fire. Long-range attack aircraft with a range of over 250 kilometers will give the Ukrainian army the ability to detect and attack targets of military value behind the front lines. According to the UK Ministry of Defense, this military aid package will be delivered to Ukraine in the coming months. Meanwhile, Germany announced the $3.2 billion military aid package. The package includes 30 Leopard 1A5 main battle tanks, 20 Marder armored personnel carriers, 18 self-propelled howitzers, 200 reconnaissance aircraft, and 4 Iris-Desselm air defense systems. France also supplied Ukrainian forces with light tanks, armored vehicles, and training. However, the United States remains by far the most important supporter of Ukraine. Days before Zelensky began his European aid tour, the U.S. Department of Defense announced a new military aid package to Ukraine. The latest U.S. security aid package for Ukraine is worth $1.2 billion. The final aid package consists of artillery shells, air defense systems, and ammunition, anti-aircraft ammunition, and equipment to integrate Western anti-aircraft systems such as the MiM-104 Patriot into the Ukrainian air. Funding for the package comes from the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative. This means that the package will be brand new. The Pentagon said in a press release that this U.S. package underlines the United States' commitment to meeting Ukraine's most pressing needs. Though military aid, the United States and NATO are trying to ensure that the Ukrainian military can repel Russian forces in the short term, but also have the capabilities to deter the Kremlin in the long term. This is a misleading proposition, but the West is finding the right balance. As a result, Ukraine does not allow Russian troops on the front lines with successful offensive operations.